I think I've chosen to challenge a little bit myself to be more outspoken about the topic that I value. So that's definitely something I've done deliberately. Speak out on LinkedIn and joining you in this discussion, and putting positions down that I think are right, entirely right and rational to have. So that's one. I mean, there's a photo on LinkedIn of me holding a photo of my daughter, which I don't think it's something I would have done maybe 2 years ago, but I think it's about time I become a bit more outspoken about this. Second of all, we're working pretty seriously and hard to solve a couple of things that I think we need to solve in our organization to drive diversity and drive inclusion with belonging as an outcome, right? And we can go into that as much level of detail as you want, but that's what I'm doing. And in particular, I think we've made progresses in some areas, and I think in the manager level, we still have quite a way to go.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Rise to Leadership podcast, a weekly show that explores topics that matter while sharing stories of inspiring leaders who are creating positive changes. I'm so excited to lead this conversation today with Bob Rog. We will discuss how Bob uses his leadership position to drive diversity and inclusion in Heinz, his tips for inclusive leadership, and the importance of self-awareness in leadership. Bob is the Managing Director Benelux at the Kraft Heinz Company and an experienced leader in the fast-moving consumer goods business. Based in Amsterdam, he is responsible for all commercial company activities within the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. With previous experience at SAB Miller and now the managing director at Kraft Heinz, Bob knows how to reach and speak to consumers and respond to trends in a fast-paced industry. He also holds a master's degree in development economics from the University of Cambridge. You can agree with me that everything going on in our world today, building a culture of belonging is more important now than ever before. As we deal with uncertain times, leaders now see the need to focus on building an inclusive and equitable culture, fostering human connections, and building a diverse and cohesive team. And Bob, a staunch and outspoken supporter of all matters concerning diversity, inclusion, and belonging, is not only going to tell us how he's making life more delicious within the Heinz business, but he is going... Sorry, my phone rang. Okay. And Bob, a staunch and outspoken supporter of all matters concerning diversity, inclusion, and belonging, is not only going to tell us how he's making life more delicious within the Heinz business, but he will also share with us the backstory on how self-awareness has helped him to lead more inclusively and equitably. So if you're tuning in today and want to level up your leadership or strategy for building an inclusive culture, you need to stay with us until the end. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat for those watching live. And for those listening on the podcast channel, send your question to program@riseandleadwomen.com. I repeat, send your questions to program@riseandleadwomen.com. I will now bring Bob up. Welcome, Bob. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Abira. Thanks a lot. And can I just say what you and Melissa are doing, the mission you're supporting, bringing women to top leadership positions is the right one. And thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Bob. So usually I like to start by, talking about, today I'm going to start by talking about driving equity through diversity and inclusion as it relates to what you do in your company, Heinz. We all know that a diverse and inclusive workplace treats everyone respectfully and fairly and provide equal access to resources and opportunities. The Kraft Heinz Company boasts about its commitment towards a more equitable and inclusive world, according to your website. And one of Heinz's commitments to diversity, inclusion, and belonging includes developing inclusive leaders. So I'd like to start by asking, what does it mean to be an inclusive leader?
So that's a big first question, Abira, that you're asking. But I think there's a few things in here that we can unpack. So first of all, I think to be an inclusive leader is to first accept diversity as a fact. That's a good start. I think that's a good place to start from. Diversity is not an opinion. There's nothing subjective about this. It's an objective fact of life. Diversity is a fact. You can go to the Bureau of Statistics for the Netherlands. You'll find that 50.3% of Dutch population is classified as female, which merits a full other discussion. But let's park it aside for a second. Over 13% of our population is of a non-Western migration background. It's simply a fact. And then the second point to say is, or I think what inclusive leadership should be about, is to understand why to care about it, right? Why it's important, why diversity in the corporate world or in business is important. And there's a lot of rational reasons to want it, but there's, I think, the most important place to start is more of a moral reason, and that's because it's right. It's right to pursue a workforce that is more diverse. It is absolutely morally right to, well, surely we can agree that it's good to have equal opportunities for whoever, whatever is your background, and that's a good thing to pursue, right? That's just a good thing to do. And aside from the let's say the moral consideration, there's a very clear business consideration, right? I mean, there's so much evidence right now that diverse teams are more successful. I believe it was McKinsey saying even that if we create a more equitable, situation or level playing field between men and women, we could add $20 trillion to the global economy. Things like that. There's like ample evidence why, in terms of gender diversity, just by itself, we could contribute a lot to our own businesses. So, probably the last thing to do is to take responsibility and do something with it. Do something with the fact of diversity, do something with the moral obligation and the business interest that you have, and actually create a workforce by acting, and probably the first place to start there is to start listening very well to people who are very diverse and different from you, but maybe let's not get into there now and park that for later.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. So it's important for those who are listening and who are wondering, how do I become an inclusive leader? You are saying that the first step is for them to start listening. Like you said, we're going to come back to that for more details. But let's get to the topic of today, which is self-awareness in leadership. In one of your speech, you mentioned that self-awareness could help us to embrace diversity and inclusion. Tell me, how would you define self-awareness and why is it important in leadership?
So regarding the first question, maybe start with the second. Why it's important? Why it's important to embrace self-awareness? I think it's at the individual level. Well, at the very least, it's useful because what I've learned is that for me, I've learned that I'm part of a system. You're not. Yes, you are an individual, but particularly in the corporate world where I work, you are, as an individual, always part of a system of hundreds and thousands of other people, right? So to be self-aware is kind of is to understand who you are in your strengths and your weaknesses, and your to the level of what makes you super happy to what really frustrates you, to know where you can help and where you kind of need help, right? Second, I think self-awareness is useful because learning is kind of nutrition for the brain, you know what I mean? And to build self-awareness is to learn what you're good at, but also what you're good at might want to improve even further, what you're not good at, and you actually want to improve a little bit of your backhand. I'm a tennis player, to develop. And I think that's just good for you, And then the topic of how the first part of your question, how it could be playing a role in, the diversity and inclusion debate that we're having. The way I look at self-awareness is very much at the opposite side of the spectrum. It's like the opposite side of self-interest, if you know what I mean. So it means taking an objective look of your personality, admit your strengths, admit your weaknesses, and knowing and accepting that if there's something really good you want to do, well, best not do it alone. Right? That's a recipe for not going far, as they say, right?
Yeah, so the question I really want to drive at is about you as a leader. How has self-awareness particularly helped you to
Sure.
embrace diversity and inclusion?
Sure. Well, it's helped me because I think it's helped me a lot understanding how, first of all, how extremely lucky I am in many ways, and how lucky I have been so far in my life. There's a lot of boxes I tick that typically my profile ticks that typically are based on the statistics are better to have than not have. Male, white man, born in Western Europe. There's a lot of things that's helped me, I think, so far, and just understanding at least to me, understanding how fortunate that is as a starting position in your life is something that I think is almost some sort of a moral obligation, if you know what I mean. So that'd be a first. Second would be that I've really, like everyone in your career, you run against walls. You do things at the start of your career. You try and do this mostly by yourself, not with teams, and then slowly but surely you figure out you're really not as important or maybe as impactful as you could be, if you just step back and understand that maybe I need someone who actually creates some sort of order, which in my case can be very useful, of all the ideas and new business ideas that I might have, or ways to improve, and prioritize them, and actually think about, is this really important now, or should we do this in Q3 when the team is more in order? And for me, it's extremely important to have people around me who complement me in this variety of thought, in this psychological profile. So that's how it's helped me personally.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rob. Somebody say, great that you have that awareness. So somebody watching from LinkedIn. So let's talk about gender equality. Of course, 2 days ago, the LinkedIn, all social media, the internet was bursting out with choose to challenge. Everybody was talking about the International Women's Day 2021 theme, which is choose to challenge. What have you chosen to challenge, and why does it matter?
So what I've chosen to challenge, well, First of all, I think I've chosen to challenge a little bit myself to be more outspoken about the topic that I value. So that's definitely something I've done deliberately. Speak out on LinkedIn and joining you in this discussion, and putting positions down that I think are right, entirely right and rational, to have. So that's one. I mean, there's a photo on LinkedIn of me holding a photo of my daughter, which I don't think it's something I would have done maybe 2 years ago, but I think it's about time I become a bit more outspoken about this. Second of all, we're working pretty seriously and hard to solve a couple of things that I think we need to solve in our organization to drive diversity and drive inclusion with belonging as an outcome, right? And we can go into that as much level of detail as you want, but that's what I'm doing. And in particular, I think we've made progresses in some areas, and I think in the manager level we still have quite a way to go. And I think that's something that we need to fix.
Okay, usually we would like to know some details of those things, but first, gender diversity, gender equality has actually been a main topic of discussion for several years, but progress has been slow for everyone. As a matter of fact, Women Economic Forum predicts that at the rate of progress, it's going to take 99.5 years to close the gender gap. And with all the benefits of having balanced leadership, a more productive, better business results, women still hold less than 29% of senior roles globally. And in one of your speeches, you spoke a lot about responsibility and ownership. How are you owning the responsibility for advancing gender equality at Heinz?
So that's a good question. There's a couple of things we're trying to do together in the team, and where I really try and play my part here. First of all, I believe we have made real progress, and I think progress that truly matters. So a few years ago, in the management team of the Benelux, which is, let's say, the jurisdiction I work in, we had 0 women. Now we have 4 out of 9. In the levels, let's say below manager level, we're at 52% of female ratio. That said, we still have a lot of things to improve, and in particular, where we are finding an area of, I wouldn't say, well, it is a concern, but mostly improvement, is on the manager level, and it's making sense because there's like high correlation between that fact and 30, 31-year-old average age, young kids, busy lives. And I think that's something to be fixed. And what we're trying to do to address that, and I don't think we've fully nailed it, but what we're trying to do, again, is to listen, understand what's going on there, why that could be a potential issue for women progressing from below manager to manager levels. And one of the things we found out is that, well, if I go on maternity leave, I feel insecure about the rest of my career progression. I don't know what's going to come after. And this was a true root cause of the problem, so to speak. So what we're trying to do is to make absolutely sure before there's maternity leave that the career progression after the maternity leave is clear, probably even clearer than it would have been without the maternity leave, so that there is certainty and that there's buy-in from all the stakeholders. So that would be one of the examples that we're doing, Abir.
Okay, would you say that is working for you? Because you just mentioned that you have, did you say 9 out of 9 senior leaders?
So in the management team level, we have 4 out of 9 female leaders. In the level below
I got that. I got that. So do you have plans of getting, because so many companies are talking about 50-50, do you have such plans in the pipeline? Is any commitments towards that coming up in the next year or two?
Absolutely. I think that there's going to be some commitments that at least that we'll be making. I think in any case, for now, it's fair to say that our responsibility, we believe, is to be a mirror of society. So I think we have a few things to fix. I think we have, or to improve at the least. So in particular, the mid-manager level is a bigger concern for me than the top manager level at the moment. 4 out of 9, 5 out of 9. That would be, I think, a fair, going back and forth in the next couple of years. But being somewhere around 30% in the manager level, so below director level, I think is something absolutely we should improve and fix. And if we don't, it's simply going to mean the actual result is going to be that we're going to lose part of the more junior workforce because they won't progress. And I think that's, again, for moral and business reasons, to be avoided.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Another thing is, it's been repeatedly proven that diverse teams are better teams, and diversity is good for business and also good for everyone, which is what I like to always say. And inclusion is even better. And here you're talking about belonging. And I believe that everybody, including me, everybody wants to have that sense of belonging. Everybody wants to know that they matter, that their voices are heard, that they are listened to, irrespective of their color, the color of their skin, their race, their choices in life. And so for me, when I look around me, it appears that women of color have never been on the discussion table in corporate diversity programs in Europe. And I think we need to address this. But apart from women of color, also people of color, people of ethnic minorities. So my question to you is, how is Heinz making its workforce more diverse and inclusive for people of color and ethnic minorities, especially in Europe?
I think it's useful to separate this answer in two buckets. There's one part of inclusion or including that we all should be doing before people join the company in Europe and Benelux. And there's an element of addressing and actively including when we are actually working, so the behavior in the office and the work that we do. And that's how we've separated, so say the way to address this problem, because as you say, there is, and I bet you that is the case for almost all of the players in FMCG, still a way to go to get to the fair benchmark, right? And the first part of recruitment, I think, is most of all is an important matter of securing you are at least speaking to a representative and diverse set of candidates, right? And that's the first step to do. And for this, we believe the right strategy is to form partnerships and talk to organizations that we might not have talked to in the past, and cooperate with them. And there's like yours, like Young Global People, like Agora. I think these are ways for us to actually reach candidates that I don't think we have reached successfully in the past. And then when we've actually started that process, the actual hiring process needs to be as inclusive as possible. And for this, I think technology can play an important role. Artificial intelligence is helping us actively in securing a most objective and fair way of assessing the candidates. We have blind resume reviews. During the selection process, we have our BRGs optionally, but always taking place in the actual interview that we're having, and some other initiatives that we take when we are actually speaking to the candidate. Then when people have joined the company, it's obviously, some say you need to include before you can actually aim to aspire to be diverse. Well, that there's like tons of initiatives, but some of the big ones that we are supporting, we have a WE network, which is a global leadership accelerator for women, to make absolutely sure that the resources and the support is there to progress their careers. We have business resource groups for underrepresented, let's say, parts of segments of the organization, that is seated by our most senior leaders. And I can assure you that they take this agenda, like from global to the level of Benelux, very seriously. Like, it's something I have to explain, right? I have to explain, and luckily I'm passionate about it, and I think my colleagues are as passionate as I am. But I need to explain what I'm doing, right? There's control in place. So that's an overview.
You're being held accountable.
Absolutely.
I know, yeah, and I know from the conversation I've had with you in the past, and also your colleagues like Yoris and Doreen, I see that you are really working towards it, and which is, I can only say well done. But there's still a lot to be done, and it needs to be very consistent about it, because it's not about what we are doing, but it's about what the outcomes are. What are the results of all of these things? So we will still come back to that much later in the year to follow up on you to see what progress you've made in that area.
I'd love it.
And now let's come back to you as a person, as a leader. Okay, we've been talking about Heinz, we've been talking about everything that's going on, and I want to talk about self-care. Like, many leaders have struggled during the lockdown with managing family responsibilities and work demands. How have you successfully done this, and what tips can you offer to our audience?
Well, you're asking someone who's still struggling with this. So
Okay, please tell us what's
yeah,
going on.
can be of help. But maybe a very quick jump back to your previous question. I think it's good in a couple of months to talk about two areas we are actively addressing to hold ourselves accountable. One is the middle manager, let's say the manager, team manager level women man ratio. And the other one is we are definitely underrepresented when it comes to non-Western immigration background in our organization. I believe is essential we work on that. So maybe to disclose some of our ambitions and to see in a couple of months how we're doing there.
Yeah.
On your question, again, I'm struggling, but as probably many are, and maybe that's a good starting point, Ibira. I guess it is very hard, in many ways to sit in a room for 12 months. Just the fact of sitting in a room for 12 months, looking at your screen, is just not a very healthy way of living. I mean, I believe it's talking to other people, meeting people. It creates order in your mind. It creates energy. I think that's how we evolved, right? So in accepting that this is definitely temporary and there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that it's making sense that you're mentally and probably physically not as strong as you would recognize yourself to be, or as you remember yourself, I think is a very, very good place. I think it's a good place to start. The second thing to do after this acceptance is to work on that root cause. Meet people in real life. You can meet your neighbor, you can meet your best friend. It's not like it's impossible with the restrictions to have social contact. And what I see with myself is that sometimes I slack in this. Then a couple of days you wake up, maybe do some exercise, then you work, and then we all know how addictive Netflix can be, right? But that is definitely not the way to go. So it's good to just take stock of where you are, take responsibility, and then actually meet people. I think it's the best remedy, at least that works for me. And maybe a final point that's working for me, and also here I need to remind myself about 5 times a week, but it's treat your day like a fluid, like a fluid stream of activities, and stop. At least for me, I need to stop thinking about the day as work. Then we have private, because then I know I'm not going to do my exercise, right? So when I have a slot at 11 a.m., and I have the opportunity, I need to go for a run, right? When I have a slot at 3 p.m., I should actually have coffee with my neighbor, because those are the moments that throughout the day actually, reboost your energy and keep going. So still struggling, but these recipes seem to be working for me.
And how did you deal with the homeschooling with your kids?
Well, luckily my kids are relatively young, so they're 5 and 4. So there's some homeschooling, but it's not as intense as the ones who go to first grade or second grade in the American system.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. And before we take our last question, I'd like to tell our audience, if you have any question for Bob, please feel free to type inside the chat. We will be taking 1 or 2 questions. And so going to the last one, Bob, you have a slogan that states that you should improve your focus, reduce the noise, never complain, and never explain. Where does this come from, and why does this matter?
This speech is going to haunt me for a long time, I think. You must be referring to the Suits and Stories episode of about a year and a half back, Beer.
Yeah.
Well, what does it mean? The best way of answering the question perhaps is to maybe quickly abbreviate why I was saying this. So, or how I explained it back then. I'm a tennis player by, let's say, I wouldn't say by nature, because I was born without a passion for tennis. But then when I was younger, at least until I was 16, 17 years old, my dream was to become a professional tennis player. I didn't make it by a long shot, to be absolutely clear, but I learned a lot. And one of the things you learn as a tennis player is how you win matches and how you win them in a way that gets you into the zone, and I think, or at least I've learned that, to do that, it's good to have the right focus. So that's what I mean by improve your focus, which means not too tight, not too flexible. You want to have this right balance of focus. Reduce the noise. It's about spectators, it's about stuff that doesn't really apply to you playing the match, and doesn't really apply to you trying to win the next point. And it's irrelevant. And never complain and never explain is about, it's a little bit about, at least what I'm trying to say, about humility. Don't talk too much about what's going well or what's not going well. Probably look at your tennis match like a series of data points that are being entered to you that you can process, right? And you can use to course correct. And once you start talking about your match, you start complaining, it dilutes your focus to do that, right? So, then translating this to life, it's not so much about winning your match, but I believe it's about pursuing your values, right? What you deeply care about, what interests you. And then if you do that, you try and pursue your values in a way that, with the right focus, don't worry too much about other people's values or what they say. Just keep going and pursue your values, and don't complain, don't explain about it. And that's something that works, at least for me. So
yeah, it's good that you explained it, because I had some issues with the saying don't explain, don't complain, don't explain. Because in Rise and Lead, I always tell the women in Rise and Lead that if they are passed over for promotion, they should complain. You should raise your voice, you should shout, and then you should explain why you are the right person to take up that position. Because this is how we close this gender gap. We're no longer taking the back seat. We need to raise our voices. We need to complain. We need to advocate for, people who we think that are being treated unfairly. And for me, so it's good you explained it. So to our audience, please, so especially to our women here, if they pass you over for promotion, I want you to complain to the highest level of decision and explain to them the value you bring to the table and why you are the right person to take up that position. So that is what we say in Rise and Lead. For me to take, I have a question here for you, but I always like to end by asking what skills or competencies or type of support, it could be 1, 2, 3, contributed to your leadership growth?
Could you explain the question a little bit? What skills or competences contributed to my leadership growth?
Your leadership. Right now, you are the managing director of Heinz. You must have, there must have been a process of growth. What's maybe two or three things that you would say? Could it be mentors? Could it be leadership trainings? Could it be some skills that understanding who you are, self-awareness? What has helped you to get to where you are today?
Good. Very good. Very good question. I think the first thing that certainly has helped me is to really ignore this whole concept of perfection and really try and improve as a leader. That means that it's kind of helpful because when you accept you have to learn, you're gonna deal with tough conversations or strategy decisions or whatever people calls you need to make, accepting that you could be wrong, right? That's very, very possible, and embracing that, I think, is going to set you up for learning. So that's one. I think number two would be to make absolutely sure you have your kind of self-awareness built so that you can build your team around you in a very, I would say, as humble as way as possible, to understand yourself again as one part of the system. And maybe three is to really try and manage your energy, which is very tough now, but it's a marathon. Like any career, I think it's a marathon, and it's particularly now endurance is quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And don't be, in a way, be impatient, but don't be too impatient. Kind of trust the process and keep steering clear towards your values. That's the best advice I can give for now.
Yeah, and you talking about challenges, I must say this past year has presented lots of challenges. And, as a managing director of Heinz Benelux, how have you dealt with these challenges, briefly, and what has been the most challenging situation you faced and how did you deal with it? Just briefly.
Sure, for sure. Again, the personal aspect of maintaining your energy, that's for anyone, I think, at least for is the biggest challenge. You need to take responsibility of keeping yourself mentally and physically fit. The second one, I started a job in February, and in March the COVID came. And obviously when you start a job, you want control, you want to understand what's going on, but you're far away, like you're in a room, there are screens. So it made me obviously a little bit anxious, nervous, I don't know what's the right word. And the way to overcome it is to stop controlling the how and really lead by people obsession and where we need to go. And typically the how kind of sorts out itself, like not perfectly. You still need to kind of help where you can help, but that has helped, and the results are pretty good. And I think and I hope it's because as full leadership team, we're at least trying to do that well and put the trust there where it belongs,
Thank you. And this is one question from somebody who is watching us. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge in attracting a more diverse workforce at Heinz? The person also said, is it lack of awareness among potential candidates or another reason?
Yeah. About the first one, the barriers, I think, are really barriers of almost of the pipeline of attracting and nurturing talent. Right. The first most important thing is to make sure that we reach out, and the other way around. I mean, everyone on the call is absolutely welcome, and I hope they do to approach us to make sure we attract and speak to at least a fair representation of society.
I was thinking whether it's lack of self-awareness among potential candidates or another reason.
Potentially, yeah. Because it's a little bit chicken and egg, but if we don't reach out to those demographics that are underrepresented in our organization, then obviously how can you know that these jobs are available? So I think the answer is probably yes. And please, for everyone on the call, please do reach out and and also share the story that this is what we're standing for, because we are. And I hope we can both take our responsibility in actually getting to a position that is morally better and rationally better, right, for us.
Thank you so much, Bob, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And if there's something I want everybody on this call today to take out of this session, is that diversity is not good. It's not only good for business, but good for all of us, even as individuals. We need to really deal with our own biases. And also that self-awareness is a tool that can help you embrace diversity and inclusion in your leadership and in your daily life. I hope you've enjoyed this session. If so, please join me again next week. We will announce it on my LinkedIn page. Please follow Bob also on LinkedIn to find out what Heinz is doing, and let's together close the gaps. Let's together drive the change towards a more inclusive and equitable world for all of us. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll close now. I'm going to give a few minutes. Somebody loves the metaphor of marathon for career. So I think I should end now. Yeah? Okay. Bye.